You thought being reliable was enough. You thought being kind, consistent, and always available would make her stay. But the truth is you were too safe. Not safe like a harbor after a storm, but safe like a museum, quiet, predictable, and already finished. You offered peace when she secretly longed for chaos, and in your effort to protect her, you accidentally imprisoned her in comfort. She didn't leave because you were bad. She left because you were predictable, and while you thought consistency meant strength to her, it started to feel like stagnation. She couldn't explain it. She couldn't put into words why the sound of your familiar steps in the hallway, the way you always knew what to say, the way you never raised your voice, why all of it started to feel like a padded room with no windows. Safe, yes, but also suffocating. You see, there's a lie you were sold. The idea that if you treated a woman well, gave her everything she needed, never caused waves, and stayed loyal, she'd never leave. That if you avoided drama, maintained peace, and played the long game, you'd win her heart forever. But women don't fall in love with peace. They fall in love with power. Not the kind that dominates, but the kind that vibrates. The kind that crackles with unpredictability, that makes their skin buzz with tension, that stirs the ancient animal in their chest. What you didn't realize is that she didn't want a therapist. She didn't want a roommate. She didn't want a personal assistant who knew her coffee order. She wanted a man, a real one. One who had fire in his voice, who had somewhere to be, something to prove, something that pulled him beyond her. She wanted to feel that you could walk away if you had to, that you didn't need her. That being with you was a choice, not a necessity. But you needed her. She was the light in your sky, the meaning in your life, the reason you worked late and cooked dinner and made sure she never had to feel discomfort. You were proud of being safe. You were proud of being soft. And to be fair, you were what she needed at first. After the whirlwind of past chaos, your steadiness felt like oxygen. For a while, until she adjusted, until the storms faded, and then the stillness became noise, a different kind of ache. One that told her deep down that this version of love might never push her to grow. It started with small things. She stopped laughing at your jokes. She stayed longer at work. She texted back slower. You thought maybe she was tired. You thought maybe something at her job was stressing her out. And you did what you always did. You gave her space, patience, understanding. And with every kind gesture, every attempt to be accommodating, she drifted a little further away. Until one night, she didn't come home, and the silence was louder than anything you'd ever heard. That was the moment it broke you. Because you did everything right. You were the man every woman says they want. The one who listens, the one who remembers birthdays, the one who doesn't flirt with waitresses or slam doors or disappear for 3 days without explanation. You were good, and somehow that wasn't enough. It's a brutal lesson, but one many men need to hear, especially the ones raised to believe that being harmless is a virtue. You thought she wanted safety, but what she actually wanted was mystery, not dishonesty, not games, but the sense that you were still evolving, still dangerous, still you. But over time you shaped yourself around her, softened your edges, dimmed your light, not realizing that in doing so you made yourself smaller. Women don't respect small. They may stay with it for a time, even love it in their own way. But respect that belongs to something untamed, not cruel but primal, not careless but powerful. A man who can walk into a room and not ask for permission to exist, a man whose spine doesn't curve when she frowns, a man who doesn't need to apologize for having boundaries. But you weren't that man. You were her peace but not her passion. And eventually she chose passion. Not because it's smarter, not because it lasts, but because it makes her feel. You made her safe, but he made her feel. And in the quiet war between the head and the heart almost always wins. You might hate her for it. You might look at her now laughing at someone else's jokes, falling asleep on someone else's chest, and feel a white-hot fury twist in your gut. But the truth is, you gave her everything but yourself. The raw, imperfect masculine self that didn't always say the right thing, didn't always yield, didn't always fold. You wore a mask of perfection, and masks, no matter how beautifully made, are still fake. She wanted you, not the version you thought she needed, but by the time you realized that she had already turned the page, and now you're left alone in the quiet with all your goodness echoing back at you like a lullaby no one wants to hear. She wasn't looking for another nice guy. She had plenty of those co-workers who held the elevator, childhood friends who liked all her posts, strangers who said you deserve better. What she craved deep in her bones was something she wouldn't dare admit out loud. a presence that could hold her chaos without flinching, a man with gravity, not the kind that holds you down, but the kind that pulls you in. The truth is, most women live with a storm inside them, not all the time, not on the surface, but buried deep within the soft tones and polite smiles is a hunger for something real, something that stings a little, something that challenges them. She didn't want to be adored like a porcelain doll. She wanted to be seen with all her flaws, all her fury, all her fire, and still be chosen, not in spite of it, but because of it. And you were always too careful, too afraid to upset her, too polite to say no, too eager to agree. You smiled through things that stung. You nodded when you should have roared. You watched her test your limits subtly at first, and each time you moved the boundary she lost another fragment of respect. Not because she was cruel, but because she was watching you disappear. Not physically, spiritually. What you called love she started calling softness. And not the kind that nurtures, but the kind that yields, that bends so far it forgets how to stand tall. And soon she couldn't feel your edges anymore. You were always agreeable, always accommodating, always fine. But passion doesn't grow in fine, it grows in friction. In the places where two people challenge each other and still choose to stay. You thought love was about comfort. She thought love was about combustion. And neither of you were wrong. You just weren't right for each other. Because what ignited her wasn't kindness, it was presence, energy, strength not just of character but of spirit. The strength to hold his own frame, to stand in fire without shrinking. The man she left you for. He probably doesn't even treat her half as well. But he has something you lost, an unapologetic self. He's not better. He's just there, fully, unfiltered, unafraid of being too much. And that boldness, that refusal to dim is what makes her heart race. It's what makes her feel alive. It's what she tells her friends she can't explain. She might complain about him sometimes. She might say he's distant, selfish, intense. But she keeps going back. Because deep down she'd rather be burned by someone real than comforted by someone safe. And you were the blanket she outgrew. There's a bitter irony here. You tried to be everything she said she wanted. You listened. You adapted. You improved. But that very effort, that willingness to mold is what made you invisible. Because you stopped being a man with a core and started being a mirror, reflecting what she needed, echoing what she said, supporting every move like a shadow, always behind, never beside. And a shadow, no matter how loyal, eventually becomes forgettable. You think if you had been meaner, colder, more distant, maybe she'd still be here. But that's not it either. This isn't about cruelty. It's about polarity, the masculine and feminine dance. She needed to feel your presence as a force, not a favor. A fire she could circle, not a safety net she could collapse into. She didn't need rescuing. She needed reckoning. But you built a home when she wanted to wander. You wrote poetry when she needed thunder. You gave her peace when she needed a reason to rise. She didn't want a man who made her feel safe. She wanted a man who made her feel seen in all her darkness, with all her shadows exposed, and who stood there unwavering, not trying to fix her, not trying to flee. That's the paradox of desire. Women don't want perfect men. They want present men. Men who are whole within themselves. Who can walk away without folding. Who don't make her their oxygen but rather share their breath only when it's freely given. And you, in your well-intentioned devotion, gave her everything but that. She didn't want to lead. She didn't want to decide everything, plan everything, feel like the adult in the room. But you kept handing her the map, the compass, the torch. You thought it was respectful. She thought it was abandonment. She didn't want control. She wanted containment, the kind that comes from knowing you won't be swept away by her waves, that your spine won't break when she tests it. Instead, you stood on the shore, arms open, telling her she could go wherever she pleased. And she did. And now you sit with this ache in your chest, not quite anger, not quite regret. Just a deep, pulsing realization that love, real love, requires more than goodness. It requires wholeness. It requires a man to stand tall even when she pushes, to say no even when she cries, to remain grounded even when the winds of her emotions scream through the walls. She walked away not because you weren't enough, but because you weren't you anymore. And maybe that's the greatest tragedy of all. You thought you were enough because you gave it your all, because you held the door, because you remembered the little things, because you never raised your voice. You measured your worth in quiet gestures and steady loyalty. But love is not earned through obedience. It's not sustained by being agreeable. And you, for all your good intentions, slowly became a man she could predict, and eventually a man she could ignore. She didn't mean to stop loving you. It didn't happen in a single moment like the slamming of a door. It was slower than that, like watching the tide pull back inch by inch until one day she looked up and realized the sea was gone. She didn't cry when she left, not because she didn't care, but because she'd already mourned you while you were still beside her. Every time you asked if she was okay, but didn't challenge her when she lied. Every time you sensed something was wrong, but chose silence over confrontation. You thought that was kindness, but she felt it as absence. You thought being not like other men would make you irreplaceable. But in her eyes it made you fade into the background. You didn't fight, not for yourself, not for her. You mistook peace for love, quiet for connection, and the more you tried to be safe, the more she had to fill in the silence with fantasy. Her mind wandered to what it would feel like to be wanted with hunger, to be held with urgency, to be told no by a man who meant it not to control her but to assert himself. And she knew you loved her. That wasn't the problem. The problem was that you made her the center of your universe, that you orbit around her like a loyal moon, forgetting that women don't want to be the reason a man exists. They want to be invited into a life that's already burning with purpose, a fire they can dance near but not one they have to ignite. You made her your mission, but women don't want to be missions. They want to be witnesses to your mission. And you, in your need to be needed, in your fear of rocking the boat, abandoned your own path. You stopped being magnetic the moment you started being available at all times. You stopped being desired the moment you started asking her how to lead. The truth that stings the most is this: she didn't fall out of love with you. She fell out of polarity with you. That invisible charge that exists between masculine and feminine, between strength and softness, between movement and mystery, it died. Not because you weren't strong, but because you stopped showing it. Not because you weren't a man, but because you tried to be something safer. She didn't want safe. She wanted solid. And when she finally walked out that door, all you could say was, "But I did everything for you." And in that sentence was the quiet confession you had forgotten yourself. You thought being selfless was the highest form of love, but in the process, you erased the very thing she was trying to connect with you: your essence, your fire, your frame. The unshakable sense that you existed long before she arrived and would continue long after she left. That's what women respect. That's what keeps the dance alive. Not gifts, not flowers, not checking every box, but presence, direction, stillness in the storm. You see, a woman can only surrender when she trusts the man she's with isn't surrendering to her. And you did. Every time she pulled away, you leaned in. Every time she grew distant, you tried harder. You became a mirror for her emotions. You thought empathy meant absorbing them, but she didn't need a man who absorbed her. She needed a man who held his shape no matter how hard she pushed against it. That's the part that haunts you, isn't it? The fact that if you had just said no a few more times, if you had just stood firm, told the truth, held your posture, maybe she would still be here. But you confused masculinity with aggression, so you neutered it instead. You thought nice was the opposite of cruel, when in fact the opposite of cruelty is clarity. She didn't want you to dominate her. She wanted you to meet her, fully, without flinching. She wanted to test your edges and find out they were real. She wanted to feel that if she let herself fall, you wouldn't collapse beneath her. But you did. You collapsed in silence. You collapsed in your quiet yeses. You collapsed in your passive nods and your endless patience and your refusal to take up space. And now she's gone. And the hardest truth to face is not that she left, it's that you helped her go. You helped her pack with every moment you withheld your truth. You opened the door with every time you put her above your purpose. You walked her to the exit every time you prioritized harmony over honesty. And now the echo of that choice fills your empty room. But maybe that emptiness is the gift. Maybe it's the invitation to meet the man you were meant to be before you tried to shape yourself into someone else's idea of enough. Because enough isn't a performance, it's a presence. And it's time you learned how to reclaim yours. Now that she's gone, the silence hits differently. It's not the absence of noise that haunts you. It's the absence of meaning. The realization that everything you built was a shrine to a version of love that demanded your sacrifice instead of your presence. And now you sit in the ashes of what was supposed to be forever, finally asking the right question. Not why did she leave, but when did I start leaving myself? It started with the small things, saying yes when you meant no, ignoring your gut to keep the peace, apologizing just to stop an argument, slowly giving up your voice until you barely recognized its sound. You thought that was maturity. But what you called compromise was really self-abandonment. And now, every echo in this empty space is a reminder of the man you became for her and the man you forgot to be for yourself. But this is not the end. This is your beginning. This is your rebirth. Because pain, if you let it, becomes fire. And fire doesn't just burn, it forges. It melts away illusion and leaves only what's real, what's solid, what's ready. And you, broken as you feel, are ready now. Not to win her back, but to reclaim what she walked away from, not your love, but your edge. You see, the man she couldn't stay with was the man who tried to be everything for her. The man she'll never forget is the one who became everything within himself. The man who stopped asking, "What does she want?" and started asking, "Who am I really?" when no one is watching. The man who doesn't need to be chased, chosen, or validated to stand tall in his truth. That man doesn't come from books. He doesn't come from pickup lines or YouTube tutorials or Instagram therapists. He comes from sitting in the fire of loss and refusing to look away, from facing the mirror and not flinching, from breathing through the ache without numbing it, from waking up one morning and saying, "I may have been too safe before, but I will never be small again." She didn't need a villain. She needed a force, a man with clarity. A man who didn't fold under the weight of her moods, a man who didn't vanish when she tested him, a man who could lead, not control, who could hold space, not surrender it. And now you have the chance to become him, not for her but for you, so that the next time a woman steps into your world, she walks into a story that already has a plot, a direction, a heartbeat that doesn't skip just because she's beautiful. You'll know you've changed when you stop fearing her walking away, when you stop tying your worth to whether she stays. When her affection becomes a gift, not oxygen. When you stop chasing peace and start commanding presence. Not by being louder, not by being cruel, but by being real. By becoming the mountain, not the mirror. The fire, not the flicker. Because the next woman who comes into your life deserves to meet a man who doesn't bend into her, who doesn't disappear in her eyes, who holds his truth like a compass and invites her along not as his mission but as his muse. And maybe, just maybe, the same woman who walked away once might feel the shift in the air. She'll hear your voice again, not soft and unsure, but grounded and full. She'll remember the man who always made her feel safe, but this time she'll see something else. A man who makes her feel alive. A man who holds her not to heal her, not to fix her, not to follow her, but to match her, to meet her, to move with her but never behind her. Maybe she comes back. Maybe she doesn't. That's not the point. This was never about her. This was about you. About the man who thought love meant shrinking. About the man who thought devotion meant disappearance. About the man who learned too late that safety isn't what keeps her, strength is. So let her memory sting if it must. Let it be the fuel. Let it carve your spine a little straighter. Let it burn off the parts of you that were built for her approval. And when you finally rise from this, when the dust settles and the mirror reflects a man who stands without apology, you'll realize something profound. She walked away because you were too safe. But now you've become the man she could never touch again. And that right there is your freedom.